Hey everyone, this is Mike from the Comic Book Trove, here today with another Omnibus review, and today I'm going to be taking a look at the Heroes Reborn, The Return Omnibus. Now, this is a book that I really don't see get talked about very often, and I'd say I understand why, because this does collect a really obscure and quite strange period of Marvel history, to be honest. It's a sequel to the Heroes Reborn Omnibus, so just to clarify that straight away, what this is talking about in terms of The Return is this is the story, at least initially in here, the story where the heroes who had been taken away from the Marvel Universe at the end of the X-Men Onslaught event spent a year on an alternate Earth for the Heroes Reborn era. This is the story where they go back to the real Earth, their actual Earth, and leave their alternate Earth behind, the Earth that's known as Counter-Earth. And this is really what this book is about. The vast majority of it, despite its title, is really not about the heroes returning. It's much more about what happens on that Counter-Earth after the heroes go back and leave it without heroes, basically. Hopefully that's a summary that's made some sense. As I say, this is not necessarily the simplest book to explain. What I'm going to do today, hopefully, is give an overview of it that clarifies exactly what it's about, what it's like, and maybe give you a better an idea as to whether or not it's something you'd be interested in picking up a copy of whilst it's still around. I think this is still in print at the moment. As far as I'm aware, I was able to find some copies of it online at the time of recording this for sale. Here's a quick look at the dust jacket. The cover is quite nice, I think, featuring some of the key characters. You got, Fantastic Four, Spider-Man, Doctor Doom. The spine, also pretty cool with that image of the Fantastic Four again. And the cover gallery on the back with a blurb and the specific contents down there. So, yeah, as I say, a bit of a strange book with just how it's titled more than anything. Because what this collects at the beginning is the Heroes Reborn, The Return miniseries. This was just a 4-part miniseries, which is the story of how the heroes go from Counter-Earth back to the main Earth and back to the main Marvel continuity. There is this summary in the beginning, which is probably doing a much better job of summarising all that than I am. And then a look at some of the key characters involved. This 4-part miniseries, Heroes Return, is written by Peter David, who at the time of this was still writing his excellent Incredible Hulk run. And it's not too surprising that he wrote this, because the Hulk was a character who was more weirdly impacted by the whole Heroes Reborn thing than anyone else, I would say, because unlike everyone else, the Hulk still existed in both worlds. The Hulk was still on the main Earth, but there was a Bruce Banner and Hulk on the Counter-Earth as well. And the way that was explained was that the Bruce Banner part of Hulk was taken away and just Hulk was left behind. But because they were separated, the Hulk on the main Earth that Peter David was writing was kind of slowly dying, if I'm right, if I remember rightly, because he was effectively not a whole person. Half of who he was gone. So in this story, by bringing the Hulk back, that kind of resolved that storyline. But the main gist of what's going on here, it really centres around Franklin Richards, the young son of Reed and Sue. And he's able to go to this Counter-Earth. Reed and Sue are there. They don't remember their past life, so they don't know that they've had children. Yeah, it's a complicated story. It's one of those stories that was just written more so to provide a story-based reason to undo Heroes Reborn, rather than because it had a particularly good story to tell. They just had to do something to bring these heroes back, and this is what they came up with. Don't get me wrong, it's not terrible. It's fine, it works. And I am actually a fan of Heroes Reborn, and I know that's not the case for quite a lot of people. So I do find this part of the story, this 4 issues here, to be worth reading just for me. But if you don't like Heroes Reborn, this is going to do nothing for you. Absolutely nothing. And really, so, I think it stands to reason, and it's potentially just an obvious point, but the extent to which you'd be interested in this whole thing, this whole book, and ultimately in reading the aftermath of the heroes leaving, and therefore what goes on this other Earth when the heroes leave it behind, that completely depends on how much you care about this other Earth in the first place. If you didn't read Heroes Reborn, or you just don't ever want to read it, or you read it and didn't like it, I really don't think you're going to care. That's fair enough. In this story, it's kind of weird. The Celestials all end up getting involved. And they basically they want to destroy the Counter-Earth, but they end up making some kind of agreement, I think, with Franklin Richards to leave it alone. Yeah, and then from this point onwards, so this is a Thor annual, features Doctor Doom, and actually Doctor Doom focuses in a lot of this story because he is the one person who stays behind on Counter-Earth, basically. When the other heroes go, Doom ends up staying behind, and in kind of typical Doctor Doom fashion, he wants to basically rule that world, take over it, and claim it as his own world. The whole world ends up going to hell, basically, though, because it loses all of its heroes. They realise that this world is forced to face the fact that it's not the true Earth, and that it's like some newly created parallel Earth. I think it's supposed to be orbiting the sun directly opposite Earth, so they're on total opposite sides of the sun in orbit. Yeah, so I'm going to flick through this book pretty quickly, to be totally honest. I'm going to give, just because, if I'm being completely honest again, I just don't have too much to say about it. I was not that impressed with this story. The stuff with Doctor Doom is pretty cool, because Doom is pretty much always an interesting character in any story he's written in. But I just found this to be, as I say, a weird book, a weird collection, not really what I expected going in, and that's on me, because usually when I pick up an omnibus, I have a good idea of the content involved beforehand. This was an occasion where I just kind of took a chance, a bit of a blind buy. Yeah, and I just found myself reading so many parts of this book just thinking to myself, why am I actually reading this? You know what I mean? So, yeah, this is a strange one. I've got to say, you know, it's not a book that particularly impressed me. It's not a book that I would really recommend. It's such a... Yeah, because here's the thing. Like, this is almost like the backup stories of the whole Marvel universe, because at this point, the Fantastic Four, the Avengers, you know, the Hulk are all back in the main universe. Occasionally the story cuts to them, but really not very often. And they were starring in their own series again, so they'd all kind of rebooted with new series, starting at new number ones. And they were really the stories worth checking out at this point in time. Like, you had the George Perez Avengers series. You know, that was after the heroes returned, and then that series began. And then you've just got this Earth just left behind with these mostly just nobody characters. You know, you've got Doom there, but everybody else pretty much is just random people. Yeah, I don't know. I just don't have much insight to give on this one, really. It just, as I say, it left almost no impression on me whatsoever. It's material that if I don't ever read it again, that won't be an issue. That really isn't... Yeah, just don't feel the need to check it out again, really. Other than the Heroes Return miniseries itself, that's probably the only part of this that I'll probably read again at some point. And really, I just wanted to make this video just to point out, I suppose, what this book is, just to clarify that the vast majority of it is not a Heroes Return omnibus, but more of a, you could really just call it the Counter-Earth omnibus, I suppose, but I guess from that title, maybe a lot of people would have no idea what that means. And understandably. But it's a thick book, you know, there's a lot of stuff in here. It's a lot of material. It's just a shame that so much of it feels like, or to me anyway, it felt like a slog to read through it. And yeah, because it just left no impression on me, I've just forgotten so much of this. I didn't read it that long ago, maybe a year ago, something like that. And I'm looking through these pages now, and I just barely remember any of this stuff at all. You know, that's not really a good sign that so much of it has completely just left my memory. But hopefully at the very least, as I flick through this, having been able to summarise the gist of it and show off a lot of the artwork, maybe it helps you decide if this one's for you or not. I don't know. I mean, yeah. It only gets my recommendation to anybody who really, really, really wants to see what happened to the Counter-Earth from Heroes Reborn after the heroes are no longer there. There's some excerpts from this series. This was a pretty interesting series, though, in general, I mean, not just in here, but the Exiles. So, yeah, pretty interesting cast of characters. Don't really remember too much about the series, though. I just remember the kind of time hopping around, I think. They get involved here because of there's, I don't know, some crisis going on that they get involved in. Yeah, the main thing I remember is that it features Blink from the Age of Apocalypse. Blink being a kind of teleporter, very similar to Nightcrawler. Oh yeah, wow, yeah, I actually forgot this was in here at the end. Onslaught Reborn, so yeah, this is something. Written by Jeff Loeb, I think art by Rob Liefeld. So already something that's quite polarizing. So this is the story of the return of Onslaught, who hadn't been seen since he was defeated in the Onslaught event itself. This is not good. I think it's the easiest way to explain it, and that's not even because of the Rob Liefeld art. I don't think his art is that terrible in here. You know, it's not great, but that's not the problem I have with it. It's just a unnecessary story. I think, you know, Onslaught served its purpose in that story. This just doesn't really add anything to the character or to anything else by bringing him back for another fight. That's actually pretty cool, I gotta say. Don't praise Rob Liefeld's artwork too much, but that's an interesting double-page spread. I'm sure if I stared at it for too long, I'd see all the flaws, but at a glance, it's pretty cool. Yeah, I don't know. Just not much to say on this one, I gotta say. It's another interesting double-page spread, actually. I think often that can summarise Rob Liefeld's work though a lot of the time. If you just look at it, kind of glancing at it, don't scrutinise it too much, it has the appearance of being okay artwork. It's only when you really analyse it, you start to see everything that's not great. This is a weird revelation as well, where like the whole thing about Heroes Reborn had been that at the end of Onslaught, mutants specifically didn't get taken away into the alternate Earth. Yeah, so that's why all the X-Men were able to remain on the main Earth when all these other characters went away. Or at least that's the story-based reason. The real reason is obviously a different story. But yeah, so this bizarre bit at the end where just this version of Wolverine just turns up out of absolutely nowhere. I think it turns out that like the version of Hawkeye in Heroes Reborn had been Wolverine all along. Makes no sense. Then Onslaught Unleashed. Oh. So by the time, and this was from more modern. This is a more modern story. Like takes place years after that other stuff. That was all 90s stuff, and then Onslaught Unleashed. I think this is not too long ago. Hence, it has a much more modern art style. Still sucks. It's just not good. Yeah, it's just like this story going in the jungle somewhere. Avengers discover like the spirit of Onslaught. Ugh. It was hard work, guys. This was a difficult book to get through in the end. When I remember by the time I was getting to this point, I was just ready to be done. some books, I don't know if this is the same for any of you watching, but some books you just find yourself looking at in your collection and just asking, why do I have that? You know, like, why have I actually got that book? And for me, this is probably the biggest example of that. So anyway, after all that, we get to some extra stuff in the back, you know, some bonus covers. Nice J. Scott Campbell one there. Always happy to see his artwork. Yeah, you know what, all in all, I think it's pretty apparent by now how I feel about it, but yeah, I'm going to say give this one a miss, unless despite listening to me being quite negative about it, if you've looked through this now during the video and thought, actually, that looks great, then you know what, fair enough. It's not for me to tell anybody what to like and dislike, but based on my own experience reading this is definitely a skippable book, I think, for the vast majority of people, unless you just have an absolute burning desire to see what happens on Counter-Earth after the heroes leave. So hopefully that's been of some interest. Been a bit of a strange turn of events for me to review a book that I've had to feel like I've been so negative about, but I always do my best to give an honest opinion on these things. Yeah, so anyway, thanks as always for watching. I do hope that it was insightful in some way, and I'll be back again soon with another video.